Alright, today we're going to talk about scatter plots a little bit. They're pretty basic, but it's a type of graph. So up until this point we've been working with straight lines mostly, a couple absolute value graphs, a couple parabolas. But a scatter plot is a graph that has points that are plotted to show a possible relationship between two sets of data. And it can be a very effective way depending on what you're talking about. So here's an example of one. So this table shows the number of species added to the list of endangered and threatened species in the U.S. during the given years. So from 1996 to 2002, you can see on the bottom of the graph, they go by years, and then the number of species on the side there. And you can see they go up by tens, and even with the years, they go by twos with dash marks in between to represent the odd number of years. And you can just kind of see and look at the graph and notice that there's a decrease in the species added to the list over the years. But basically, yeah, you can set up your own range and your own domain and graph this on your own, and you'll just plot the points. Now, keep in mind you're not going to connect these points, because even when you look at what your x-axis is talking about, you wouldn't have 1996.25 years, or even more interesting, you wouldn't have any species like, you wouldn't have like 2.5 species or 72.6 species or anything like that. So they're just points that are plotted. Okay, so we wouldn't connect those lines. All right, so that's a scatter plot. And a couple things we can discuss about scatter plots are correlation and trend lines. And I want to start off with correlation. A correlation just describes the relationship between the data sets. So you can see on the left that a positive correlation happens when your x variable and your y variable increase at the same time. So they kind of, it goes up like that. A negative correlation is when one of the data sets decreases as the other increases, giving us a downward type motion. And if there is no correlation, it looks like someone threw up on the page or something, you know, so just plots everywhere. Okay, that's probably a really bad example, but it looks like, you know, just points everywhere and there's no really relationship between them. All right, so we can look at different scatter plots and have that discussion. So the graph on the left appears to have a negative correlation. And what does that mean? Well, that means, at least for this data set, that as the hours that you watch TV increase, the test scores decrease. Okay, and that should make sense. If you watch less TV and you're focusing more on studies, then obviously your test score should reflect that. If we look at the graph on the right, we appear to have a positive correlation, meaning that it's talking about snowboarding competition and the number of participants. That must mean that over the years, snowboarding competitions have gained popularity, and more people are joining those competitions as time goes on. And then lastly, sometimes you don't even need to look at a scatter plot. You can identify a correlation just based on what you're talking about. So for instance, here A, the number of empty chairs in a classroom and the number of students. Well, we want to look at the two data sets. We would expect that as the number of students decreases, the number of empty chairs will increase, or vice versa. If we have, well, no, we want to think about it that way. So if you have a classroom full of students, as they leave or as they decrease, the number of empty chairs will decrease. And if they're ever opposite, remember that's going to be
I can have your attention, please, Samar Cabot.
A negative correlation. Sorry about that, I tried to pause it. All right. Letter B, the number of pets a person owns and the number of books they read last year. Those two things are completely unrelated, so we would expect no correlation. And lastly, the the amount of rainfall in a month and the depth of a reservoir. Well, as the rainfall increases, the depth of the reservoir would also increase. So this would be a positive correlation. And that's all I've got for correlation and scatter plots. And then check out trend lines next video, very short.